start the show today with a preview of everything that's going on with the weather. Do I need to be worried about shoveling?
Yes.
Do I need to be prepared for additional snow?
Yes.
Do I need to expect that winter could drag all the way into March?
Yes.
All yeses. You weren't supposed to tell him that. You were supposed to give him a little bit. You're supposed to give a little bit of maybe.
Maybe.
We will wait and see. Here, you take this, Mike.
Okay, are you coming in?
Yeah, are we ready?
Yeah, we're ready. Come on in.
Let's roll in. Now, I
Roll
normally will sit back, come in at the end of the show. I come in with crazy questions or treats or dessert or whatever.
Yes.
But today is special.
It is. Thank you for coming.
By the way, that was a great show. It's always a great show you guys are
good.
doing. But I was back there trying to dig out in my drawers and find out my eclipse glasses.
We've got
and
them
all of the
somewhere
things.
for you.
It was nice.
Yeah.
I have a picture of myself wearing glasses the last time we had an eclipse.
It was awesome. I was on the roof here. It
Were
was
you?
so much fun. Yeah, we were all on top of the roof and with our glasses, and it was awesome. Yeah.
I see in the background, out like a lion.
Yeah.
What's left of
that's
winter.
what we're talking about.
Yeah,
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pass this mic because we've got really talented and people who know about weather and I don't. So I'm going to be cameraman
Oh, okay.
while you guys give us this whole breakdown of everything that's going on. Cool?
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to pass the mic.
We'll
Who's taking this one?
we'll
take
put
it
our
along.
graphics up here so you can shoot them up here, so you don't have to look at a small screen. So we'll put
Team
everything.
effort.
Yeah, we'll do it almost like the whole Vanna White kind of thing. I don't know if
like
you can
it.
see me. So this is what this. We'll close the door of the weather
Sure.
center so we don't get interrupted. So yeah, so this is the snow on the ground right now that you can see. It's all in northeastern PA where it should be, into the Adirondack Mountains in New England. But there's not a lot. I mean, we don't have anything on the ground. And then up through the Great Lakes, and then the Intermountain West. In the west, the mountains of California into Portland, and also as you go north into Washington. So not a lot of coverage for a winter.
Well, to that point, they're going to get a lot of snow coming up in the Four Corner states, particularly around Colorado this weekend. A lot of Pacific moisture's coming in to dump some snow. And I love this graphic because you can see where the Appalachian Mountains are in the east, where we see a little bit of snow right there. And, that's been our problem so far. We haven't had these juicy systems that come up from the ocean, just like that Pacific moisture that's coming in off the ocean and heading toward Colorado for the weekend to
Yeah.
dump like a foot of snow.
And nature always seeks its balance. So as they're going to be dumped on, we are going to be dry. We've been talking about it all week, right, Scott?
Yeah.
Been talking about how we're finally going to see the sun, how it's finally going to warm up. So just as they are getting dumped on with cold, we have a ridge building in the east, and we are going to be experiencing nice weather. Now, that's for the beginning of the month. But let's review January. So, Scott, talk a little bit about this because it's the most snow we've had in 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, remember we went through that snow drought where we couldn't really buy a snowflake or a flurry, and then we had that cold week, and we saw two storm systems that brought us about 3.5 inches one day, and then the next system we saw that amount that gave us the 3.5 additional inches, and now we are up to, of course, the 8 inches of snow for the month of January. No snow left on the ground, but things could change as we get toward the month of February. February is a tricky month. I mean, typically around Valentine's Day as well as President's Day, we can have some of those blockbuster storms come up the East Coast. We've been watching the water temperatures earlier in the month of January. We used to have water temperatures that were in the upper 40s. They've cooled now to the low 40s, so we're going to be watching that as well as the cold air that will be in place. So, I mean, we are normal for snowfall right now with the 8 inches of snow that we picked up for the month of January. But take a look at the outlook for the month of February. We're talking about the potential for above average temperatures for a good part of our viewing area. That includes sections of Chester County, Montgomery County, Bucks County, into Berks, the Lehigh Valley, as well as for the Poconos. But I think some of that cold polar air could break down and move toward our area again, like what we saw in January, and give us maybe a turn of events toward the middle and latter part of the month of February. What do you think?
Oh, particularly the middle. So there's been some hints already that the next potential, doesn't mean we're going to get it, but the next potential for some snow would be around Valentine's Day, because we have to wait for some of that mild air to retreat. and get the colder air to drop down. So the next 2 weeks looks pretty quiet. Then, as you mentioned, usually around these parts, around the middle of the month, it starts getting a little chilly. So there you go. You see why we're not getting snow in the meantime. And you brought up a great point about the ocean water. Remember that first storm that the Lehigh Valley got the snow, but we didn't in the Philly? Because the airflow was coming in off the ocean. The ocean water was super warm.
And it shut it off.
It
shut
did.
off the snow and changed it to rain.
Right, because you get that air that's above the ocean, warmed up by the ocean to come in. So we missed out on the snow in the Philly area, but farther north we got it. So that's a great point that the ocean water is getting colder. We like that.
Yeah.
If you want snow.
If you want snow. So this is the 10-day trend, as you mentioned, and that takes us through February 10th. So yes, things are definitely going to change. So this is what we think, Bill, as far as like a forecast for February. February 1st through 14th, temperatures will be at or above average. We're very confident. High confidence, as we say in the meteorology world. And then February 15th to 29th, below average. And that is when what we call the signal kind of changes. The pattern's going to flip. And that is going to be your best chance of seeing snow, mid to late February. And that makes sense because we've had storms traditionally around Valentine's Day and around President's Day. So it's definitely the pattern. So that is what we're expecting. Now, we have to talk a little bit about the types of snow. And we've talked about this with our winter forecast, Drew. I know you focused on this.
We sure did.
And this is what we think for additional snow events through the end of winter, which we're including March. Meteorologically, we're December, January, February is our winter, but we're including March because, you know,
Well,
we
come
all
on.
do for the start of spring.
We get snowstorms in
Yeah,
March,
we
so
do.
we got to include it.
Sometimes we have to include April, but go ahead.
Well, you know what's interesting about this? Some of my friends who are meteorology, they've been talking about this from day one. Some of the signals that we use for long-term forecasting hint at storms on the back end of winter. The cold air coming in the back end, which means as we look at this gives you a feel for what you can plan for as we get into mid to late February and into March. No, if you want that big blockbuster snowstorm of over a foot, that's not in the cards. But we will have some storms that ride up the coast. They won't have all that moisture like a typical coastal storm that can dump easily that foot of snow, but they will have some moisture like we've seen, and that gives you some plowable storms. So plan for 2 plowable storms. Now, we also will have some storms under 3 inches. Those are those inconvenient ones where you need to get the shovel and you don't need the snow for
The broom, maybe. To get the broom and just kind of sweep your stoop like that.
Yeah, you need the cold air for that because if you want the broom, you need cold air. Temps in the mid-20s or less, which usually we don't get. I'll tell you guys a quick funny story. A friend of mine does the weather out in Colorado. We were talking about that snowstorm, and he said, oh, this snowstorm is going to be like an East Coast snowstorm. Those guys don't know what that means because we usually get snow that's good snowball snow because temps are close to freezing. That snow is close to melting, which is why more wet and compacts into a good snowball.
Yeah.
But, you know, for us, we'll see. Let's hope for a nice broom snow.
Yeah.
You had that colder air like we had a little bit earlier this
Yeah,
season.
a piece of that polar vortex coming down.
And that's what you need, but it's going to be hard because El Nino is going to stick around.
Yeah.
And that's part of the forecast that we have to consider as well. So we just definitely need the moisture and the cold to come together, which we haven't been that successful, right? We had 1 week that it happened in in January. We're hoping for another week in February, but this guy is kind of getting in our way this year.
Yeah, and some of the trends are that not only will it continue for this season, but maybe even into next season as well. So strong signaling from the Pacific as far as this pattern kind of being locked in place. So what a typical El Nino pattern means is cooler and wetter along the lower 48 and even toward parts of the mid-Atlantic, maybe trending a little wetter as opposed to white, and then warmer and drier as you move toward the northern tier.
Yeah. So with El Nino, that's going to be one of our wild cards. So we have February figured out. March, we do have some wild cards, and one of them is El Nino.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really going to determine what happens during the month of March. Of course, we're seeing a lot of changes. As you mentioned, the smaller window for cold temperatures, the average high temperature starts to range from the upper 40s into the mid to upper 50s. So with temperatures that are typical, well above average, it's going to be hard to get some of that cold air to give us some of those snow events. And the all-important sun angle, that is really going to be key. Even when we get that snow during the month of March, it doesn't stick around long because of that sun angle, and it's really difficult to accumulate during the day, especially better chances if it falls overnight.
Absolutely. So now all these things have to come together for us to get this snow. But even with that being said, we will have opportunities that we have the cold. We just have to see if the moisture comes at the same time.
Well, and to that point, so one of the things that El Nino does, that warmer than average water off the coast of South America, it shifts where the jet stream is. And that jet stream, you guys know, that's our barrier between cold air to the north and warm air to the south. But it's also wavy, so that can lead to a little dip of that cold air, even that Arctic air you were talking about. And that's what we'll have our eye focus on, because the models, those future radars that go far out, they have a tough time picking up on those little wiggles in the jet stream if the cold doesn't just sit over us. But you bring up also, talking about sun angle, reminds me of April Fool's one year. We got some snow in the morning, and it was a joke because in the afternoon, it was gone.
And that's what usually happens. So, but this is why it's the hardest month to forecast.
Right.
Because we have to put that element of sun angle in our mind and the intricacies of climate change in our mind. And, you know, how warm is the ground? Was it 60 or 70 degrees the day before? You know, we have to get into those fall forecasting skills in the spring, because it's very hard to do, but it has been done. I remember one year, probably within the past 5 years, that we had most of our snow in the month of March.
Oh, yeah.
So it definitely can happen, especially having a backloaded kind of season. So with all this being said, depending on what happens in March, for the rest of the winter,
Drum roll.
it is possible to get an additional 10 to 16 inches.
Dun-da-da.
Yeah, so
Is
we're
that
not
surprising?
Done. We're not done
Is
yet.
that surprising, Bill?
It's very surprising. I don't have a mic, so yes, it's surprising. I actually didn't expect to see that, especially extending all the way to March.
Yeah. So, you know, if we'll be on the low end, obviously, if March is a little bit of a bust, but we will have some opportunities in February. So that's what we're going with.
And by the way, average is about 23 inches when we do actually have an average winter snowfall. And we look back at the stats just over the last 10 years to account for changes in our climate that's been warmer. And it is still average to have 23 inches of snow. So we're working our way there. That brings us to average to a little bit above average.
Yeah.
And
so we'll
last year we only had 0.4. Right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're already well above that. But you know, we need a couple of good snows, and we'll see if we'll see if we get them. Yeah. But we definitely have that opportunity coming up in a couple of weeks.
So
Answer your
potentially
question.
out like a lion.